introduce another guest that we have outside the Florida courthouse. Is a defense attorney, Derek Boyd. You've been a criminal defense attorney for a long time. I understand as a public defender you were representing more than 2,000 defendants, and your family's from there. Your father is a criminal defense attorney, so it's really a pleasure to have you there with us today. Thank you. Derek, let me ask you about that change of venue motion. Were you surprised that this case did not get moved out of Sarasota?
I was. I mean, I was born and raised in Sarasota, and I don't ever remember a case having this much publicity. I mean, it was on the front page of our newspapers for almost the past year. Everyone has seen that image. 25% of the jurors right off the bat said they couldn't be fair. And, you know, I've had some jury trials where high-profile cases where you know, it's been widely covered by the media, and you always find that a lot of people, even in the jury pool, will not say in front of an open group of people, oh, I can't be fair. They feel a little intimidated by saying that. So if 25% had the courage to say, look, right off the bat, I can't be fair, you have to also wonder if another 25% were thinking that but said something different. So I was surprised that we sat a jury here in Sarasota. And
you said that this is the biggest case that you've had there, that, you know, that anyone's had in that community.
I think so. I think the video made it that big. I mean, anytime a girl is abducted, supposedly raped and killed, it's always going to make, you know, headlines. But that image of actually catching it on video, possibly hours before she was, you know, raped and killed, does make it unique.
Are you surprised that this didn't sort of get pled out because of that damaging evidence?
Well, I mean, what can you plead to? The state attorney was not going to offer anything but the death penalty. I mean, I rarely have you ever seen someone just enter a plea and just go ahead and accept the death penalty. Now, one strategy he could have done is he could have actually said, I'm going to go ahead and admit guilt, because it seems to me the guilt phase of this trial is pretty evident. I mean, there is just overwhelming amount of evidence as I see it against Joseph Smith. He could have stood up to the plate, to accountability, and just said, look, I'll plead guilty to the guilt phase. I'm sorry for what I did. I made a mistake. I was on drugs. I got this terrible past, and go right to the sentencing phase. In my mind, that probably would have given him a greater chance of surviving and not getting the death penalty. But you know, he's chose to challenge all the evidence in trial, and that's what he'll do. Very
good point, though. He might have ended up with life in prison, but as you say, this really struck everyone as a death penalty case. Eric Byrd, criminal defense attorney. Let's talk a little bit more about the defense attorney in this case. I understand you know the defense. Tell me.
Oh yeah, I used to work with Adam Tabruge at the public defender's office. Adam is a career public defender. He is the proverbial true believer. Adam went to New College here in Sarasota, which is a high academic institution. He was law review at Florida State. He started right out of college at the public defender's office. He quickly became a felony attorney, and for at least the last 15 years has been their chief homicide defender. Adam gets stuck, I say stuck with virtually every death penalty case, all of the high-profile murder cases. Many of Adam's cases are, you know, have the smoking gun, so to speak. And he is a very thorough, very intellectual, very effective defense attorney. He doesn't have, say, some of the pizzazz that some other defense attorneys have, which sometimes works for him, sometimes works against him. He really runs the same speed throughout the trial. He will not miss anything as far as evidence goes. He will, you know, preserve his objections. He will give Joseph Smith as good a defense as Joseph Smith could have, certainly in this area, and maybe if not the state.
And what about Judge Andrew Owens, Jr.? I know that you know a lot about him as well. He was quite an athlete.
Yeah, I practice in front of Judge Owens almost every day. He's been on the criminal bench for almost 3 years. He, interestingly, he was at University of Florida. He was their star basketball player, I think, back in the either late 60s or early 70s. I think he still holds their career scoring record at University of Florida, something like 27 points a game. He lets you know that when you're in his courtroom, of course. I'm a Florida State grad, so Judge Owens kind of wants you to know that. He's a very fair judge. I mean, he is someone who I would say is right in the middle. This is a very conservative community. Sarasota, predominantly Republican, predominantly pro-law enforcement, and quite frankly, we have some judges that you would classify as being pro-state. Judge Owens is not. He's not pro-state. He's not pro-defense. He's an in-the-middle judge. He's a fair judge, and I think that Joseph Smith will receive a fair trial with him. And I know that Judge Owens has gone to great lengths to preserve a lot of this evidence, in the sense that he's not allowed at least half of it to become public. He's done everything he can to try to not have Mr. Smith predisposed prior to his trial.
Thanks, Derek. So, Derek Byrd, listening to what Savannah said, you know, this was a subject of should or should not this confession, if you will, be thrown out. The judge has allowed it in. Are you surprised?
Well, it depends on whether or not the Smiths are agents then of law enforcement. If law enforcement told them, look, you get in there and here's what you should ask and this is how you should ask it, and your job is to go in there and elicit a confession from your brother or your son, if that's what they're saying to the mother and that's what they're saying to the brother, then the Smiths then become agents of law enforcement, and they've gone in there and they've questioned him after Joseph Smith has supposedly, exercised his rights to an attorney. If that is the case, that statements cannot come in. But on the other hand, if the family is going in there and speaking to them strictly as family members, as concerned citizens, and just saying, hey, we think you did this, this is terrible, this little girl's family needs to know where she is, give her a proper burial, what's going on, and it wasn't at the request of law enforcement, then it's admissible. And that's what Judge Owens found. Judge Owens did not find them to be agents of the law enforcement, found them to be just, citizens, just family members who are going in there, and therefore it comes in. So, I guess at that point, I'm surprised only if because it seems to me that there was some at least encouragement by law enforcement. To me, that makes them agents.
Does the fact that the brother allegedly asked for the reward money influence your decision one way or the other?
Well, I think that's going to influence the juror's decision, because maybe it's going to come across as that he was a motivated witness and that maybe some things that he's saying are not exactly true. He's looking for the reward money, but I don't know that that really makes him more of an agent of law enforcement.
Derek Byrd, criminal defense attorney out there in Florida as well, outside the courthouse. I wanted to ask you, now usually criminal convictions don't come in. Of course, if he is convicted and we go to a death penalty phase, then it's a different matter in terms of mitigating and aggravating circumstances. But what about this 1993 incident, 1997? Do you think that prosecutors will be able to get it in somehow, or you feel like the defense can keep it out?
I think the defense will keep it out unless he takes the stand. I mean, I doubt very seriously he'll take the stand, but if he does, then they're allowed to question about every prior conviction you have for a felony or any convictions you have for crimes involving dishonesty like bad checks or petty theft. The 1997 incident where he was acquitted, I don't really see how they're going to get that in, even in the death penalty phase, is because he's been fully acquitted of that charge. But of course, the rest of his convictions all will come in, whether he testifies or not, in the death penalty aspect, in the sentencing phase. But I don't see them coming in and any attempt to get them in the regular guilt phase. And these prosecutors are very experienced, and they've tried cases of this nature before. And I think they're going to be very careful not to do anything to push the envelope to risk anything happening on appeal. They've got a strong case. They really don't need to push the envelope. They don't want to give him any appellate rights in the guilt phase.
I know you've mentioned Adam Tabruz as a fantastic defense attorney, but if you were defending this case or you were his partner on the defense, what strategy would you take?
I mean, the only strategy you can take is that someone else, of course, did it other than Joseph Smith. I mean, it wasn't Joseph Smith's car. It was his roommate's car. It was his brother who led them to the body. I mean, I guess conceivably you could argue that the roommate must have done it. It was the roommate's car. It wasn't my car. And the roommate's lying that I had his car that night. And my brother's lying about the location of the body, that my brother knew the body was there only because he put it there or someone else told him about it. Because those are the two things that really tie him in the most.
To our Sarasota-based criminal defense attorney, Derek Byrd, the biggest case in that area because that videotape went out all over the world, actually. Derek Byrd joins us live from outside the courthouse. Thank you so much for being with us. We know you're a busy criminal defense attorney yourself. Let's talk a little...
Yes, yeah, no. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, let's talk a little bit about the death penalty cases. I'm sure you've done your share. We've got the guilt phase, then the penalty phase. What's tougher?
I think the penalty phase is tougher. I mean, a lot of these death penalty cases, the reason the prosecutor seeks the death penalty is they know they've got a pretty strong case. Because if you had a case that merited the death penalty and there were some flaws in the prosecutor's case, then they would often offer the defendant a life sentence, and the defendant would plead to a life sentence. So the cases that make it as far as a death penalty case typically are strong cases for the prosecution. So the guilt phase itself, quite frankly, absent a minor miracle, you have an idea what the outcome is going to be. It's the penalty phase when you, as the defense attorney, have someone's life at your table, and you feel compelled, you feel this overwhelming amount of pressure that, I'm responsible for his life, which really you're not, but you do feel that way. And if the jury says death, you feel like, oh no, I've maybe somehow contributed to this man going and being killed. If the jury says life, you feel this big sense of relief in the fact that, he's going to prison the rest of his life. It's bittersweet, but yet again, you don't feel like he's not going to die on your watch.
In California, where I practice law, the death penalty verdict often means life in prison because of appeals and whatnot. How about Florida? How long from someone being adjudicated, guilty and gets the death penalty to actually getting the death penalty?
You'd probably average about 10 to 12 years. 10 to 12 years, but these days a good number of them. But before Apprendi, before a few cases from the Supreme Court came out, there was a trend where I would say about half of the people who were being sentenced to death were getting death, but it's about a 12-year wait here in Florida.
Now this Sarasota community is 93% white, 4% black, fairly affluent. It seems like this is the type of jury that, if convinced, would recommend death.
Yeah, the Sarasota is more of a wealthy retirement town. I mean, kind of in the same genre of Naples here or Boca Raton. I mean, Sarasota is a wealthy community, very educated community, but it's also very pro-law enforcement. There's definitely more registered Republicans than Democrats. I doubt that we have, I think, maybe one of elected 16 offices who's a Democrat. So you've got a very pro-law enforcement, a very conservative community. More likely than not, particularly in a case like this, would go for the death penalty. That being said, we did have a recent death penalty case that I actually testified in. I knew the gentleman who was on trial. I went to high school with him. His name was Errol Watts, and he was accused of killing his two parents, who were real leaders in our community, both educators, and he was sentenced to life. The jury, same attorneys, Adam Tabrouge was the defense attorney, Deborah Johns-Riva was the prosecutor, and the jury went for life as opposed to death. So, it can't happen.
Tell me about the prosecutor.
Well, the prosecutor team, one thing that's unique about this trial is both teams, if you want to call them that, are about the most experienced that we have in Sarasota. On the prosecutor side, you have Dennis Nallis. He's the #2 in command of this circuit's prosecutor's office. He's been a career prosecutor, has been doing this for over 20 years. Very thorough, very talented prosecutor. Recently, and I say recently, probably in the last 5 years or so, he's been doing more administrative duties for the prosecutor's office, so hasn't been in trial a lot. So I'm certain that a trial of this magnitude that brought him, say, out of the office and back to the court floor is going to be one he's going to be very prepared for. Deborah Johns-Riva, who's their #1 trial attorney at the prosecutor's office, has tried death penalty cases, is extremely thorough. I find her very persuasive in front of juries. She's an attractive, classy, just a woman that really has her stuff together in trial, and is capable of raising the level at one hand and being thorough in the other hand. And then finally they have Craig Schaefer, who's their division chief, who's a very energetic prosecutor who's probably a little bit more impassioned than the other ones. The kind of guy that on a closing argument, I could see him actually doing the closing.
Let's go to Derek out in Sarasota, Florida, outside the courthouse. Would you put him on, assuming he's found guilty in the guilt phase, would you put him on for the penalty phase, try and save his life?
Only if he's going to get up there and show true allocution. If he's going to get up there and say, look, I did this, I'm terribly sorry, this is my terrible life that I've had, and I was on drugs, and I've got daughters, and I was trying to be a good dad, and this was a day that I was just whacked out on cocaine, and I've been drinking all day, and I just can't believe I did this. I mean, if he's going to get up there and make a genuine, remorseful allocution, then yes. If he's going to get up there and dance around it and doesn't seem genuine and doesn't seem remorseful, then no. A lot of times attorneys are a little bit leery on putting them on and having them just go ahead and spill their heart, because I'm afraid that they feel that there could be an appeal, and if there's an appeal and the case gets reversed and it comes back, you've got that problem. But I don't know Joseph Smith. He's not probably a very educated person. He's been in and out of the law for most of his life. I'm not sure, maybe he's capable, maybe he's not, of getting up there and making an impassioned plea for his life. That's about the only way I could see that I'd put him on.
With your theories, what is your view looking at this tape and having talked to more than 2,000 criminals in your day? Well, I'm sure some of them were not guilty, but you know what I'm saying. Well,
there have been rumors, and it's been reported in the media, that maybe that Joseph Smith knew her family. I mean, there have been some stories and there have been some rumors that have flown around Sarasota in the courthouse. Joseph Smith, this road that this happened on Bee Ridge Road, there's a couple of, for lack of a better term, hole-in-the-wall bars on that road, bars that, kind of seedy bars that are not within short miles of that incident location. And there have been some rumors that her mother, Susan, hung out at these bars and maybe had known Joseph Smith, and it's a possibility that he walks up and says, and she's maybe seen him before, or he says, I know your mom's up the street, something along those lines. Now those are unfounded rumors, but they have been reported on, and it have been something that people have talked about and have looked into. And I'll tell you, and Adam Tabrouge, he and I are close friends, the defense attorney, but Adam is very tight-lipped, and I don't put him in an uncomfortable spot by asking him questions about his defense on this. And I wouldn't be so surprised if you start hearing evidence that comes out in the trial that way. If he admits that, yes, that's him on the video and has to somehow explain as to what he's doing, the only plausible explanation would be is that, oh, he knows her, he thinks it's improper for her to be walking home at that time. It's Super Bowl Sunday, by the way, and so there's not a lot of traffic going on during that time frame because everyone's home watching the Super Bowl. It's right about kickoff of the Super Bowl, actually, and that he sees her as he's driving home and says, look, you need to come with me.
Out of the courtroom is Derek Byrd, criminal defense attorney. Derek, tell me about the feeling around the courthouse. I know that this case has just riveted the community. Are you seeing a lot of people? Are you feeling a lot of tension?
I am, and you're seeing a lot more people than you normally would. I mean, obviously, Court TV's here. There's a lot of media here. There's cameras set up everywhere. It's quite a media event. And a lot of people who normally would not come over to the courthouse, prosecutors, other defense attorneys, probation officers, you name it, who are interested in the trial, actually wanting to get a seat in the courtroom. I think every seat in that courtroom will be taken, and that'll last for the next 2 weeks. I mean, it certainly is the talk of the town. By the same token, I think that a lot of people probably can't wait for this trial to end to kind of put this behind us. I mean, we don't have a lot of this thing happen in our community, so in one area, it's kind of somewhat of a black eye.
The defendant looks a lot different than he does in his mugshot. He looks a lot older. He looks a lot heavier. I imagine you can put on a lot of weight when you're in custody and you stop using drugs and the like.
Yeah, and I think that the food that they serve in the jail, I mean, it's not like he's on a no-carb diet. I mean, most of the stuff that I see over there, it's a lot of bread, it's a lot of, fatty foods and things of that nature. So most of my clients, when they're in custody, as you said, they do end up gaining weight. And of course, you have to wonder, did Joseph Smith intentionally put on some weight? I mean, when you're caught on this, if the biggest piece of evidence against you is this video, and in that video, that person looks, like you said, about 5'8", 5'9", maybe 150 pounds, and now Joseph Smith appears to weigh over 200 pounds. Is that something that you would want to do as a strategy? Possibly. That's
a wonderful point, Tanya. I hadn't thought of that, because he certainly, I really had to take a double take and say, yeah, this guy looks like the older brother, maybe, of the guy on the left. I mean, if you look at the pictures, it looks like he's aged 10 years.
That's true. He looks very different. However, the DA is talking about DNA evidence, and you're not going to be able to really walk away from that just because you put on a few pounds.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as a ploy, I don't think it would particularly work, but there is, this kind of stress that he is facing. His life is on the line, and certainly that's going to age someone faster than a lot of other things.
Oh, yeah.
Derek, you've been in that seat. I mean, everyone's different, but in a death penalty case of this magnitude, you're sitting there the first day. What are some of the emotions that you think the defense team is going through, the defendant, if you can speculate?
Well, I imagine the defendant is the one who's most nervous in there more than the defense attorneys. These defense attorneys have done this so often that they've been there before, although this case has more media attention than others. I think the prosecutors, quite frankly, are probably a little bit more nervous than the defense attorneys in the sense that the defense hasn't had to reveal its defense. I mean, up to this point, no one really knows exactly what the defense is going to be. So the prosecutor sits there, and I see this happen in a lot of my trials, and they've got their notepad out and they've got their pen in their hand, and as the defense attorney is doing opening statement, they're writing down everything almost as fast as they can, like a lot of the things that they maybe didn't expect. In Florida, we have a very open discovery policy. We even have depositions, and then, Tanya, that might surprise you, but in criminal cases in Florida, we have the right to depositions. That means that the defense has deposed every single witness the prosecutor has and knows exactly what they're going to say. So there's really no surprises, for the defense attorney. There shouldn't be, whereas for the prosecutors, there often are.
Interesting. Derek, I don't know if you can see inside the courtroom, but there's a blonde woman sitting next to the defendant. Do you have any idea who she is?
No, I don't, and I really can't see inside of the, I can barely see on my monitor. I can see Joseph Smith. Mm-hmm. But the blonde woman,
yes,
you said?
The blonde woman.
The blonde woman is Carolyn De Silva. She's been a public defender for some years.
Okay.
She works in Manatee County. And Steve Schaefer as well, who also works in Manatee County.
Derek Byrd, criminal defense attorney who has practiced there for many, many years. Derek, I understand your father was a criminal defense attorney as well.
Yeah, I would say he was. He was also the chief prosecutor here. He was the #2 in command at the prosecutor's office for a number of years. I think he even hired Dennis Nallis, who's their chief prosecutor today, and also was a criminal defense attorney here for quite some time and handled quite a few death penalty cases, prosecuted them and defended them.
So did you ever think of becoming a doctor?
I don't think I was smart enough to become a doctor. No, but I think I knew pretty early on I wanted to become a defense attorney. I've always been a criminal defense attorney as far as when I got out of law school. I worked at the public defender's office and then here. And so there really wasn't much other career path for me, but this one, I don't think I had many other choices.
Derek, did you lobby for this case? Did you want it? Was this a really, competitive thing to get it?
No, I don't think anybody would really want this case, to be honest with you. A lot of, murder cases typically go to the public defender's office, and that's why Adam Tabrouge has so many murder cases that he's tried, is that, quite frankly, a lot of people who are accused of killing someone else don't have the funds for a private attorney. I mean, since I've been in private practice, I've handled a couple murder cases. They weren't death penalty cases, and they've gone to trial. But it's rare, really, that someone's able. This isn't California, I guess, where a lot of high-profile celebrities with a lot of money.
I was going to say that because when you said that people don't want these cases, a very prominent national death penalty case, a lot of attorneys would want that case. If no other reason, the publicity, the chance to enhance their career. It's a big opportunity.
Well, I think this particular case in this community, yeah, you may have enhanced your national reputation. I don't know how much you'd enhance your local reputation. I mean, this has just had a lot of backlash. I mean, this is not the case I would have, I'm not saying I wouldn't have taken the case. It certainly would have been very expensive for the Smith family to hire me, because you got to balance out the cost of representing him versus the cost of dealing with this sort of pressure, dealing with this sort of stress. And I think you'd be surprised. I mean, locally, a lot of people would have been a little bit remiss with you for being on the case. Adam Tabrouge himself, I mean, he stated he gets hate mail, he gets hate email, he gets people who call and complain to his boss, Elliot Metcalf. A lot of people don't understand that a criminal defendant has the right to be defended. He has the right to the best representation he can get. That's our system, whether it's murder or it's possession of marijuana, that's the system. But there's been a lot of backlash even on Adam for this.
Well said. That's absolutely true.